Good afternoon. I'm Alex Lucia, and I'm your host for today's segment of Brookfield Today and Beyond. Brookfield Today and Beyond is a show brought to you by the Brookfield Republican Town Committee. We encourage you to submit questions. Our email address is www.brookfieldgop.com, and it will be up on the screen both at the beginning. It was there at the beginning, and it'll be there again at the end of the show if you want to send us questions. Today's guests, I have Steve O'Reilly, candidate for First Selectman, and George Walker, candidate for Selectman. Thank you for joining me, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
I think since, although you're not strangers to town, we should probably start by a recap for people who don't know you as to some of your experience, both professional and personal. Steve, why don't you talk a little bit about when you came to town, what brought you to town?
All right. My wife and I came to town a little over 30 years ago. And we looked at, Danbury, New Fairfield. We'd been living down in Norwalk at the time, and we really fell in love with Brookfield when we saw Brookfield, and we decided that's the place we're going to move to.
And what do you remember being the draw? What did you love about the town?
I liked the small town atmosphere of Brookfield back then. My wife liked the schools that she saw, and we just felt that Brookfield was a place we could call home.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing that. Yeah. How about yourself, George? What brought you to town? When did you get here?
Well, Alex, my wife and I came into the area almost 40 years ago from upstate New York. We actually first we came in with a corporate move, which happened to be Xerox Corporation when it moved its headquarters in from upstate New York to lower Fairfield County. We moved into Danbury. We owned a home over there, had 5 children, and all of our children went to the school system over there. And we became empty nesters, as my gray hair belies, and shows there. And as we became empty nesters, we quite frankly decided that let's move on to another home someplace. And we liked the area, we looked in the area, and we absolutely fell in love with the Brookfield area, principally because we wanted to buy a home on the lake. And of course, there are 2 lakes that border Brookfield. And we settled over on Lake Leelanau almost 20 years ago. So that's how we got into town.
And while I'm talking to you then, George, why don't you tell us a bit about your professional background so we have an idea as to the skills you bring to the position of selectman?
Sure. I am a real estate professional by trade and education and so forth. I started in the business many years ago, right out of engineering school. Went on, got a business degree, a management degree actually, and climbed up through the corporate ladder with Xerox Corporation in its heyday when it was doing major developments all over the United States. That resulted in a great career in the real estate, the commercial real estate end of the business. So that is my background in that professional side of it, and have overseen many very large corporate capital projects, and also ran a lot of their buildings which had major budgets as well. So I bring the capital program development and management, as well as overseeing operating budgets as well in that corporate life. And beyond that, I did move into other corporations. There is life after Xerox, as they say.
Well, I was going to say, I know when you left Xerox, you got involved with real estate a little closer to home here. Why don't you talk a bit about that? Because I think that's a really unique set of experiences that'll benefit the community.
Yeah, right. I did get into, eventually what I did is I was on what I call a 3,000-mile commute with Xerox, and wanted to get off the airplanes and get much closer to home, and eventually pulled that down into, on a very localized basis, to working with a family that owns the Berkshire Corporate Park. And I guess my claim to fame there is I negotiated on behalf of that family the ultimate development of the Duracell headquarters and there was a lot of other expansion and major projects that happened on that property. And I think later on in the program I would like to talk a little bit about that particular side of things, that my observations
Yep.
about the some of the things in the zoning side of things in town.
I'm sure we'll come back to that. Steve, why don't we take a minute and tell me a bit about your professional background, because I think people would want to know.
Sure. Yeah, basically, for the bulk of my career, I've been in credit and collection management with several large companies. Over the last few years, I've taken a little bit of a detour, and I've gotten into payroll management, human resources, and yeah, that's what I'm currently doing. But by and large, with the credit management, I understand budgets. I understand the numbers that make up the budgets, and I think I bring that to the table as first selectman.
I was going to say, it sounds like you have a good, solid accounting background, and now that's been complemented by human resource experience. Would that be a
That's
fair summation?
exactly, Alexis. That's exactly what's happening, and I think it'd be very beneficial in town hall.
I was going to say, it sounds like a perfect blend of professional skills for the community. Now, why don't we talk a little bit about some of your volunteer efforts in town and some of your involvement in other boards and commissions to give people a flavor for what brought you to this point.
Sure, and when we first moved into town, my wife got immediately involved with the Newcomers Club, and at the same time I got involved with the Brookfield JCs.
Oh.
I was a member of the JCs for 10 years, and for those old timers, you may remember the town fair and the haunted house and the Easter egg hunts. Yeah, that's what we did. It was a great organization. But time goes on, and I eventually gravitated towards the Candlewood Volunteer Fire Department. I've been a member there now for 25 years. I had served as president for 17 years. And it's a great organization, and I hope to be able to stay with it. In addition to that, I was on the Planning Commission in town for 8 years. I was on the Board of Finance for 8 years. And I'm finishing up my second year on the Board of Selectmen.
Well, with 18 years experience between the Board of Finance, the Board of Planning, and the Board of Selectmen, it seems that you have a pretty good grasp of the issues that we face as a town. Would that be a fair statement?
I think that's a pretty fair statement, and yeah, I understand the town. I've been involved in the town, and I think I bring a wealth of information and background and experience in the position that I'm currently going for as first selectman.
And I'm sure on behalf of many, I could extend you a thank you for the work you've done with the Candlewood Volunteer Fire Department. Having a volunteer fire department has saved our town quite a bit of money over the years, and I'm sure people appreciate the efforts you've done there.
Yes, thank you.
George, I'm going to turn to you. Tell us a bit about your background.
Yeah, some of the volunteer stuff that I've been involved in, actually I took a lot more time to get, and once I got off airplanes and was able to spend a little more time here on a localized basis after we moved into Brookfield, I got involved at the board of directors level at the regional YMCA, eventually became chairman of the board of there for several years, oversaw the budgets and the management and operations of the management that ran the regional Y, whose headquarters and a very large operation, of course, is in Brookfield. I'm also been involved in various other, I'll call it environmental advocacy groups that are lake related, right on the Lake Leelanau, as well as the Confederation of Lakes of the state of Connecticut. I'm on the board of directors of that. And I've also been involved in various other economic development boards on a state and regionalized basis over the years. With that, I have a good understanding of how the local economics as well as the political scenario operates and and how things are, revenues and taxes are spent and generated and so forth. Yeah.
Some people might be surprised at the fact that you're both an environmental advocate as well as a developer. You want to talk a little bit how you reconcile those roles?
Well, you know, it's interesting. I've literally been involved in developments all over the United States, as well as on a localized basis. And many developers are branded as paving the world as such. I've seen that and I've heard that, but that's quite frankly quite the opposite in, well, quite honestly, most developers that are out there. They have a good sense of awareness of the environment, they're sensitive to it, they understand how growth has to happen, they work within the rules and regulations of the various communities. And I point to the Berkshire Corporate Park, which is one that I had a lot of experience with locally. People can literally drive there themselves because part of the Berkshire Corporate Park is in Brookfield, as well as Danbury and Bethel. It's right on the south side of town, and that is one of the premier green type environmental business parks in the United States. Not just in this area, but in the United States, and I've seen a lot of them out there. So we as developers are not out there to quote unquote pave the world. What it does do, fortunately for most communities, is it does bring jobs and it brings tax base with that type of development.
I travel across the state and I've been to many of the commercial parks, and I have to tell you, Berkshire is premier. I've never seen anything more beautiful. Let me take a minute. Why don't you, we'll start with you. Why don't you tell me, as a candidate for Selectman, what you see differentiating yourself from the gentlemen who are going to be running against you?
Well, basically, I think that Steve and I are, and Steve, of course, will speak for himself, but I think as candidates here, we have a tendency to be much more conservative in our approach to the tax and spend that we're seeing. We want to certainly do a lot more with less. We certainly do not want to get involved in the slash and burn that I know that some people are going to talk about as far as us cutting the education budget. That is far from the case, because I know that I'm a major advocate of the education side, the public education side of this community, and I think that we would like to, let's call it, slow down some of the spending that's going on over there, not the cut and slash and burn as such.
And how about yourself, Steve? I want to give you a chance to
So,
elaborate a bit.
And by all means, I think George and I, we want to hold the line. Now is not the time to be spending and increasing taxes. We just want to slow down a little bit, take a time out, sort of regroup. I mean, we've gone on a spending spree the last couple of years, and I think it's enough is enough. This whole attitude that it's okay to increase taxes year in and year out, I reject that idea, and I think we just want to just hold the line for a couple of years. And like George said, the notion that we're anti-education, that's silly. I mean, my 3 kids have gone through the school system in this town, and they've gone on, to higher education, and all 3 have done very well. I'm pro-education, but just spending money doesn't equate to making it better at times.
Alex, if I could interject,
yeah, please,
to dwell on a couple of things and expand on some things that Steve said there, is that there are other issues that are going to start to differentiate us is as we talk through in other programs, because there are going to be other programs that we're going to be developing here over the next couple of weeks, and we're going to talk about water issues. There is a water issue at Green Ridge. We'll discuss that in depth. There is an ongoing let's call it question and items associated with the South Federal Road water line. I know that there's going to be some things coming up about that in the future. and how do we project a pro-growth and grow our tax base in this community without adding a bunch of homes and all that sort of thing. It's the, how do we develop that? And I'm looking forward to that type of discussion, and to allow the constituents of this town understand how we're going to look more positively toward that.
And if I might, I'll add one
Go.
point if you don't
Disagree?
mind.
No.
Yeah, I think we're going to have a more open, transparent government. I don't know why anybody in this town has to go through the FOI process to get information from town hall. When I become first selectman, if somebody wants information, we'll give it to them. Why am I going to make someone go through that freedom of information? We want to have an open, transparent government.
I think everybody will appreciate that, and I'm sure there are many in town who will appreciate the efforts that you guys have at holding the line on taxes and developing in a way that delivers more revenue for the town with less demand on services, so that we can have the type of community in Brookfield that everybody probably came to town for. I guess as we're looking to that, let's talk a little bit about how you as the leader, I guess you're first among equals when you're first selectman, Steve.
Yep.
So talk a little bit about how you see that leadership role translating into action for the town.
Well, I think, number one, I know that I work for the people of Brookfield. They don't work for me. So as a first selectman, I'm going to listen to the people. I don't bring any spare baggage along with me. I'm not beholden to anybody. I think I will lead by example. I will talk to people. I will listen to people. By all means, George with his background, I value George's background. I will listen to him. He brings a lot to the table that we should utilize.
And George, as a member of the Board of Selectmen, you're going to be playing a key role in determining what goes before the Board of Finance. And
Exactly. One of the things that in my background I forgot to mention earlier was that I was on the Board of Finance. I was an elected official, appointed first and then elected to the Board of Finance years ago. And I've worked very closely with our opponents, including Steve, during those years on the Board of Finance. We all did work together. Back then, as Steve knows, is that I opposed the tax and spend attitude that was coming down from our opponents, who were they were both on the Board of Finance at that particular time, and I took a much more conservative approach as well. I think one of the biggest things that Steve also has mentioned here is that we're going to listen to the constituents of this town. We're not going to dictate. We're not going to mandate. We're not going to operate by mandate as such. It's important for us to listen to the constituents, understand what the hot buttons in this community are, and communicate. I think that's one big thing, is that we'll certainly be able to communicate on a much broader level than what I understand and I've seen that's gone on here recently. And when there's an issue such as up at Greenridge with the water, we'll sit down with those folks, talk to them, and so forth. Whether it's that type of an issue or some other kind of an issue, we'll listen to the constituents and the people in this community.
And if just one more point,
Sure.
just on the Greenridge community, the bottom line is that Greenridge are the people who are going to be paying for whatever water they get, whether it be United or Aquarium. But they're paying for it. They should have a say in what water company they're getting, which right now they're not being listened to. They feel frustrated, and it's their water. They're paying for the whole thing, and they should have a right to be heard. And right now they don't think they are. And George and I will listen to the Greenridge community and others.
so that's the type of issue where you feel paying attention to the people would be
Sure.
really important.
We really should.
Why don't you take a minute, because I'm sure George is going to want to elaborate on this, but why don't you take a minute and give us some of your thoughts as to how we might develop the town to be more sound fiscally going forward?
Well, I think, yeah, definitely we've got to take a look at the grand list. We've got to take a look at what's coming, what revenue is coming in. And we should spend accordingly to what's coming in. I don't think we need to be bonding projects now. What we've committed to, yes, we're going to continue. But I was against bonding the road project. Yeah, we're going to be bonding this for 20 years, and the life expectancy of roads is what, 10, 12 years? We could be doing the same road work now within our budget instead of having to borrow that money. And to this day, we still don't have any money in the road budget, so we're going to spend this $10 million. Then the town's going to be faced with, well, we need to put money into the roads again. Long-range planning, I think we should have just, as our long-term debt was going down, we could have put that money into the roads, and we would have accomplished the same thing we're accomplishing now.
And George?
And Alex, in the environment that we have, the economic environment that we have, not only on a localized basis, but on a national basis, we really need to look hard how we spend our money. I mean, we have to be almost spendthrifts at this particular point. We have people who have losing their homes. Homes are underwater as a result of devaluation of real estate, and the pain in not only on a national basis but on a localized basis is there on an economic basis. We need to make sure that we pay attention to how we're spending those dollars. It's got to be must-have or need to have, not something that we'd like to have. I mean, why in the world are we building a bike path to nowheres right now, right below the police station? I mean, this just absolutely is deplorable that we are spending that kind of money out here just because the state gives us that money. That's our taxpayer money, and the constituents in the town of Brookfield, it's their money as well as my money and everything. But yet we do have our folks at Town Hall who are, you can see the construction underway right now. I call it the bike path to nowheres. That's an unnecessary project that we're spending that kind of money. And that's the type of thing that we need to slow down. We'll eventually have that sort of thing, but in this current economic times, that's not what we need.
And by the same token, I know that you have some strong ideas about how we might grow the grand list so that we can do more in the future. You want to address some of those thoughts? Yeah,
if I could. I think that one of the things that slows down and stops growth in a community is, especially where we have a very limited base of commercial, potential commercial development, which is right along Federal Road. I mean, that's pretty much what we have in this town, and up in Berkshire Corporate Park. We need to become much more, I'll call it, pro-business. In the past, I hate to say it, but the town of Brookfield has been known as a anti-business attitude out there in the, I'll call it, the development community. I was a recipient of that. I went to many of the zoning commission meetings over the years, and I watched some of that happen. I literally watched some constituents in this town before I ever even moved into this town. And just as an observer in the audience, I watched some constituents be reduced to tears by our own zoning commissions and land use boards that are there. That's unconscionable. Now, major changes have been made as a result of the last election. We have a much more business-friendly land use group now, but they need leadership from the top, and that's where Steve and I are coming from, is that we need to make sure that the business community knows that we're here to welcome you into this community. We're going to work with you. Instead of throwing roadblocks in front of business coming in to be able to do something in this town, we want to say, how can we help you? How can we work with you? That's what will make us grow and grow our tax base so that we can keep our taxes in line.
And you know, George's background in putting together commercial deals and commercial real estate, he's an invaluable asset to this town. And if anyone can get the commercial area rolling. I think George is the guy to do it.
And with that, I seem to recall one detail. What development has taken place in Berkshire Park in Brookfield?
It's interesting you bring that up. Berkshire Corporate Park is 300 plus acres. There's 125 acres in Bethel, almost 100 acres in Danbury, and about 78, 79 acres in Brookfield. And quite frankly, Brookfield missed the boat when the opportunity to develop up there had happened. There's, in the town of Bethel, there's currently, they get a little over $1 million in tax revenues from the Berkshire Corporate Park in Bethel. Danbury gets about $500,000 in tax revenue. Brookfield, zero. No development. And that is a direct result of the anti-business attitude that occurred when the development could have occurred when things were happening out there. Okay. Now, as this economy turns, and it will turn, I've seen enough cycles in my lifetime.
This is not going to be forever. Huh?
This will not, folks. As bad as it is, this will turn. Guaranteed, it will turn. And we hope that we're going to be there, ready to take it on and bring added revenues into this town. But you got to do that with a much more business-friendly town. And I think we're headed in that direction with the land use departments currently. The way that has changed. We need to have the leadership here at the top of the house to help that along.
And do you feel that by the way we've bonded expenditures currently, we've set a bad stage for the future? Would that be a fair assessment?
I think by bonding, we'll be paying for 20 years for roads that we're going to have to be replaced before 20 years is up.
Right.
I think that's a bad idea. If you don't have to bond and borrow, there's no reason to. And we didn't have to with the roads, but we did.
Well, Steve, I want to thank you for joining us today to begin to give the voters in Brookfield a taste as to what your leadership style will be. I'm sure they will welcome the openness that you've promised. George, the wealth of experience you bring to the town, I can't see it being anything but a positive. On behalf of the Brookfield Republican Town Committee, I want to thank you for joining us today at Brookfield Today and Beyond. If you would like to forward questions to us for future sessions, you can send them to www.brookfieldgop.com, and we'll be glad to address any issues that are of concern to the voters in Brookfield. I thank you both.
Thank you.